That was a lot shorter this week, so give me a second. For the last 5 weeks in our church services here, we've been looking at what constitutes a healthy church. And we've been going through this series entitled Healthy Church. And so starting back at the beginning of January, we talked about what is a healthy church. And today we're going to be wrapping up that sermon series. And my hope is that as we get to the end of this series on what is a healthy church, that you would not only know what a healthy church is, but you would know what is a healthy member of a healthy church. Because it is only together, as we are healthy members, we are healthy participants in that community of the church, that we can ever hope to be the healthy church that God has called for us to be. So just to recap for this Healthy Church series. So what we started with, if this is the first Sunday that you've been able to join us in our Healthy Church series, if you've been here for all 6 weeks of it, the very first Sunday, the first Sunday in January, we looked at what is the foundation of a healthy church. So I'm going to ask you to participate a little bit. What is the foundation of a healthy church? This is where you answer. What is the foundation of a healthy church? What? Jesus. Okay? Jesus' word. Just like the parable of the wise man who built his house upon the rock, a healthy church is built upon the word. And it's built upon the Bible. And when we started to unpack that, and we started to look inside the Bible, and we started to look from Genesis all the way to Revelation, we saw that the entire Bible is full of the good news. It's full of the gospel. And so the second week we looked at what is the gospel, and what does it mean to us? Is it for us, or is it for those outside of these church walls, or is it for both? It's for both. The third week we started to say, okay, if now we know what the gospel is, what do we do with it? Well, our job as a church is to proclaim, to share, to shout, and to talk about what that gospel actually is. And so the two ways that we proclaim the gospel, the two ways that we proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ in our lives, is we share it through evangelism, which we talked about the third week. And then the fourth week, what was the other thing we talked about? Discipleship. So we proclaim the gospel, the good news, through evangelism and discipleship. And last week, the way that we proclaim is we learned that we need to be a good steward of those gifts that God's given us. And just as Alicia prayed, we've all been given 3 gifts. Our time, our talents, and what was the third one? Treasure. Our treasure. Our time, our talents, and our treasure. And today we're going to be wrapping up this sermon series, and we're going to be looking at today's sermon this morning is entitled, What is Serving? What does it mean to serve in the church, but also outside of the church as well? When I grew up, the church that I attended when I was a little boy, when I was growing up, it was an unhealthy church. The church that I attended. And as I was going through and as I was being raised in this church, the problem is the fact that we thought that we were a healthy church. But actually we were an unhealthy church. And just like a cancer or just like a disease can be present inside of your body without you knowing about it, that's what was going on in this church when I was growing up. We knew that there was something wrong. There was something that we just couldn't put our finger on, but we knew that there was something inside of us that just wasn't quite clicking. Now don't get me wrong, as a church, we had a lot of really, really good things going on at this church. We had people getting saved. There were people who were coming into an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. And not only were they getting saved, and they were being baptized as well, because they wanted to proclaim and let everybody know, this is what I have chosen with my life to do. That I want to be baptized. I want to share with others. Listen, this is the fact that Jesus Christ is now my life, and I'm living my life to serve Him. There was a lot of that going on, and that's a good thing. Actually, none of these things we're going to talk about right here are in and of themselves bad things. We had the best potlucks. Church of the Nazarene, so we had really good potlucks. We had the best meat, and we had the best starches, and not as good as Jenny's stew was last night, but we had the best desserts. We had the best everything for potlucks. We also had 2 revivals a year, in the spring and the fall. We would call what is known as an evangelist, and this man, he would come to our church, and in the spring, we actually, some of you may balk at this, we actually went to church 5 days a week. Okay? And we went to these revivals, and this evangelist, he would preach, and he did an amazing job, and people would come to know Jesus Christ, and we would stay for 2, 3, 4 hours at church, just singing and praising God. And twice a year this would happen. There was really good things going on in our church. We had a great children's program. We had a great youth group, a big youth group when I was growing up. But something was missing. And the sad thing is, as I got older and I started to visit more churches, I began to see that all of these churches that I had attended or that I was a part of all had this one thing in common. There's a group, a rock group called Drowning Pool. And I decided I'm not going to sing this for you this morning, so you can say thank you. But I think the lyrics of one of their songs perfectly encapsulates what was wrong in each of these unhealthy churches that I saw or that I noticed as I was growing up. And the lyrics are this: I don't care about anyone else but me. I don't care about anyone or anything. I don't care about anyone else but me. Each of those statements starts with what? I. It was all about us. It was all about our church. We were a selfish church. And a selfish church is an unhealthy church. It's one that only focuses upon itself. And an unhealthy church is one that is internally focused. It is a church that the programs, the events, and the activities are all about its own members. It's all about serving them. It's all about what are you doing for me today inside of the church. These unhealthy churches, these internally focused churches, they are not a participating member of the community. They are one that is a participating member internally, but not externally. An internally focused church is one that is not a partner with other churches. Now I'm going to let you in on a little secret this morning. When we get to heaven, it's not going to be segregated. There's not going to be a Baptist section. There's not going to be a Nazarene section. There's not going to be Assemblies of God section. And I know this might blow some of you away this morning, but we all serve the same God. We're all on the same side. We're all on the same team. Why are we not working together? In order to make an impact in our communities for Jesus. The gospel, the good news that we have, the good news that we have to share it. Why are we trying to do it all on our own? And an internally focused church is not a partner with other churches. It is also not in touch with the needs of its neighborhood. Not only is it not in touch with the needs of its neighborhood, it doesn't even know what those needs are. So how can you plan on helping somebody in their needs if you don't even know what they are? And then finally, an internally focused church is one that is not a consistent servant. Now, a lot of churches that I've been a part of, we do a really good job of big events. And we do a really good job with big programs. But let me illustrate it for you just a little bit differently. When you enter into a relationship with somebody else, what would it look like if your relationship was like this? Let's say that Jay and I, that I want to become a better friend, that I want to enter into a better relationship with Jay. So early in the morning, Jay and I, we wake up, we drive up into the mountains, we go skiing for half the day. Then we go to a nice restaurant, we have some big steaks, Jay will probably order 2 sides of bacon, we'll have a great lunch. And then we'll go catch a movie together. And then later on after that, we'll probably go get some more food and we'll hang out that whole night. And we had a great day. And so I go back to Jay, I'm like, Jay, I love the day that we had together. Now listen, I really want to be in a good relationship with you and I want this to grow. So I'll see you again in 6 months. How can we hope to have a relationship with each other if we never see each other? If we're never partnering with each other, if it's not a consistent service? Or if I tell him, man, Jay, I really enjoyed hanging out with you. Next year at this time, we're going to get back together again. We're going to go skiing. We're going to go have a good lunch. We're going to go see a good movie. Is that how relationships are formed? No. They're formed by consistent relationships. And that is not the mark of an internally focused church. A pastor friend of mine, who's up in Boulder, and yes, our church is up in Boulder, and he said this week on Twitter that the church is not a social club, and the pastor is not a program director. Is that true? Is it true that the church is not a social club? It's just not a gathering place for us to hang out on Sunday mornings, eat some donuts, drink some coffee, get free childcare, and then go back on our merry way later on? Rick Rusall, who's a pastor up at Lifebridge up in Longmont. I heard him speak at a pastor's gathering a few years ago. And he asked this question. And when he asked this question, it blew me away. It hit me right between the eyes when he asked this question. And I pray that it hits you the same way, because it felt like someone just punched me in the gut. And the question that Rick asked in front of this whole room, there's about 300 to 400 pastors. And the question he asked was, if our church were to disappear, would anybody notice? If Faith Venture Church were no longer here, would anybody in Commerce City notice? It's a hard question to answer that. And I'm going to answer it for you. If they don't notice, then we're doing something wrong in our communities. See, a church that seeks to serve itself is one that is internally focused. It exists primarily for its own members, for their happiness, for their pleasure, for their satisfaction. I'm going to tell you something this morning. When the board hired me back in November to be the pastor here at Faith Venture Church, the reason why I am your pastor, the reason why I am your leader, the reason why I am your shepherd, is not to make you happy. The reason why I am your pastor is to push you in the direction of obedience to God. When we look at Scripture, and when we look at the way that it relates and talks about these churches that are internally focused, and Scripture gives us a lot about this topic. In order to justify its selfishness or its internal focus, an internally focused church, it has to use different measurements than a church that is externally focused or a church that is healthy. So this unhealthy church, this internally focused church, the two ways that it measures its effectiveness is by the number of people and the number of programs. An internally focused church measures its effectiveness by the number of people that they have showing up and the number of programs that they have on Sunday mornings. Now, they may have a great youth group. They may have a good children's group. They may have a room full of 1,000 people or 10,000 people. But it doesn't necessarily make them healthy, does it? I once overheard two pastors that they were talking at a conference. And as with any job, when you're sharing with someone, you're saying, okay, what do you do? Okay, I'm a pastor. And it begins to do that. Eventually in the conversation, you start to compare. And you want to know, Okay, how does my church stack up? Or how does my job rank against that other person? And so I overheard one of the pastors ask the other one, he said, hey, how big is your church? And the other pastor, quick as a whip, said, we're about 30,000 square feet. See, this pastor knew that the true measure of effectiveness of a church is not in how many people that they have, or it's not in the size of their building, or it's not how big the offerings are. But this pastor knew that the true way of measuring effectiveness is to measure it according to the way that Christ measures our effectiveness. See, an unhealthy church, it measures the following things, and it assigns an inordinate amount of priority to them. And again, in and of themselves, these things, they're not bad. But they shouldn't be our only tool for measuring our effectiveness as a church. And so they'll use numbers, they'll use measurements such as attendance. In 2012, in February, how many people were we running? Well, we were running 72. And this year we're running 73. Does that mean that we're more healthy than we were last year? No. But maybe we had 5 people come to Christ this last year. Or maybe we had 5 people say, I completely, 100% dedicate my life to Jesus Christ and I want to serve Him with my entire being. Is that a healthy church? An unhealthy church or an internally focused church, another measurement that it uses and it assigns an insane amount of priority to is by internal volunteering. What percentage of the church is volunteering? Or how many programs do we have? Or how many hours do our people spend on Sunday morning setting up or tearing down or serving inside of the church? Or how wonderful is your pastor? And I sort of say that joking, and I sort of don't. Because when we go to a church and we're asking somebody about their church, what do we normally ask them? How good's the pastor? How good's the staff? How good's the worship music? Do they get the spelling right on the words up on the screen? Does the pastor only preach 20 minutes? Or is he long-winded? What are the measurements that we use to measure our effectiveness? See, I don't want you to get me wrong. We need people to serve inside of the church. In fact, we need it every single week here at Faith Venture Church. But the things that we measure, that effectiveness, the number of hours that people are serving, that can't be our only measurement for effectiveness. While each of them can be the indicator, or an indicator, of a healthy church, they can't be the only indicators. So what are the true indicators? Well, again, we go back to the Word. If a healthy church is founded upon the Word and we need answers, we go to the book. We go to the good book and we say, God, what did you have to say about this topic? What are you saying to us today in 2013 on February 10th? When you had your people write it 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, what did you want to say to us today at Faith Venture Church? And so we turn this morning to Matthew 25. And look at Matthew 25. We're going to be beginning this morning in verse 31. Matthew 25:31. And it says, when the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, then He will sit on His glorious throne. Before Him will be gathered all the nations, and He will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And He will place the sheep on His right, and He will place the goats on His left. Now I want to skip down to verse 41. Please, Pete. And it says, then He will say to those on His left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And listen here. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. I was naked, and you did not clothe me. I was in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and we didn't minister to you? Lord, when did that happen? Then He will answer them, saying, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment. But the righteous, as we're going to talk about here in a second, will go on into eternal life. When you look at this passage here in Matthew 25, beginning at verse 31, where does it say in Matthew 25:31 that we need to start another program? Where does it say in Matthew 25 that we are only to focus on ourselves? Who does it say that we should be focused on? To others. To the least of these. In that list that he gave us. Michael Hidalgo is the pastor of Denver Community Church down in South Denver. And he said the church is the only entity that exists for the benefit of its non-members. I'm going to say that again. The church is the only entity that exists for the benefit of its non-members. Is that true? Is that how we're functioning here at Faith Venture Church? I want to hear these words. Look back at Matthew 25, start at verse 34. This is what I want to hear as a church. Then the king will say to those on his right, to the sheep, he's going to say to them, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And the righteous will answer in the same way. He said, "Lord, when did we do these things?" And he will say to them, "Truly I say to you," down to verse 3, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." So what does Christ call us to do? What are the measurements that Christ uses to measure the effectiveness of the healthy church? He asks us to give food to people. He asks us to give drinks to people. He asks us to welcome people. He asks us to clothe people. He asks us to visit people. He calls us to be an externally focused church. He calls us to be a church that thinks outside of ourselves and wants and desires to serve others. By caring for those who need, the hungry, the thirsty, the strangers, the naked, the sick, and the imprisoned, our acts of compassion. The things that we do for others are the same as if we did them for Jesus Christ himself. So if an unhealthy church, if an internally focused church measures its effectiveness by the number of people and programs, an externally focused church, what they're interested in is two things. One, getting people out of the church. And number two, getting them in to the community. An internally focused church, what does it measure? It measures people and it measures programs. An externally focused church, it measures getting people out of the church and into the community. I've mentioned this, I believe, every single week since I have been your pastor. In the Great Commission, what's the first verb? Go. Go. Nowhere does it say in that Great Commission, those last words by Jesus Christ, when he's talking to his disciples, to say, "Man, I have equipped you, I have trained you, I have given you everything that you need in this world in order to be able to serve now. Stay." He tells us to go. And he says, get up out of your seats and get into the community. The only reason why we were able to serve others, this is key to understand the difference between an internally and an externally focused church. The only reason that we are able to serve is because he first served us. Because Jesus first loved us. He loved us so much that he sacrificed and gave his life for us. But it didn't stop there. And then he conquered the grave. And he conquered death, and he conquered Satan, and he rose again on the third day, not only to give him life, but to give us life as well. I don't want you to leave here this morning gung-ho for the kingdom and say, man, I need to go out and I need to start serving because Pastor Jay told me to. Your works, or the things that you do to serve others, they're just a natural response of the things that he has done for you in your life. You can't help but do them in your life. An externally focused church is one that is constantly looking for ways to get involved in the community. And I'll tell you right now, we will fail as a church to be externally focused if we only leave it up to the staff of the church to come up with ideas on the ways that we are to serve. If we leave it up to Pastor Jed, if we leave it up to Alicia, if we leave it up to the leadership team here at Faith Venture Church, if we are the only one who are coming up with ideas or ministering to the people in our community, we're going to be an unhealthy church. And we're still going to continue to be an internally focused church. There is a group of people that you uniquely come into contact with on a daily basis. That is unique to you, that I don't come into contact with that exact same group of people. Now, there may be some overlap, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we all come into contact with them. God uniquely placed you in that situation for you to share the gospel, to proclaim the gospel through both evangelism and discipleship in word and deed. And who are those people? Your Starbucks barista. When you go into Starbucks over here, when you talk to that same barista and you walk in, you've been there too much and they know you by name and they hand you your drink when you walk in. The people at your job, your family, your friends, your Facebook friends, your favorite restaurant, that waiter, that waitress that you always see when you go there. Or the lady at the Taco Bell drive-thru line, when you go there, it doesn't matter. Your kids' sports games. You go to a wrestling match, or when you go to any event that your kids are doing and you see those other parents and you're sitting by them on the bleachers. Those people and those relationships are unique to your situation. At some point in time, we started convincing ourselves and telling ourselves that it was okay to serve in the church as long as it's a big program event. As long as we're doing it all together, it's okay to serve that way. But you want me to serve by myself? You want me to serve outside of the church? You want me to do this on my own without being prompted or without being told to? You want me to take initiative? Yeah. And it's not Pastor Jay that's telling me that. It's God. His Word. I remember when I was growing up, my father was a pastor. And I remember there was a couple of people in our church, and that the way that they served people was unique in its own way. We had one couple, they had the gift of hospitality. And every Sunday, if there would be a new couple or a new person that would show up to church, whether it was one person, 2 people, or 15 people, they'd invite them over to their house. And they'd have them over for Sunday afternoon dinner if they were a new person here at the church. It was their gift. It was the way that they served, that they wanted to show people that they cared about them, that they loved them, and they wanted them to be a part of the body. There's another gentleman, he was an elderly gentleman, he was about probably late 60s at this point. He was already retired, his wife had passed away. And so during the day, he didn't have a job, and so what he would do in the summer is he'd wake up in the mornings, and he would go and he would take his mower and he would mow every single house on the street. That was his way of serving. He had the time to do it. The Lord prompted him to serve in that fashion. During the winter, the same gentleman, he would go out and he would shovel every single person's walk, every single person's driveway, all the way up and down the street. And the first couple times, people were like, oh, that's really nice. But then people started to feel bad about it, so they would go outside and they would help him. And after a period of time, he told me that they would have a crew of about 10 guys, or people, that would come outside and they would all shovel the entire neighborhood together. And it was really cool because each guy would sit at the top of the driveway, and there'd be 10 guys all lined up, and they'd go down, and they'd do the whole driveway in about 5 minutes. And they go on to the next driveway, and they'd do it, and they'd do it again. This wasn't something that the church told them to do. This wasn't something that the pastor told them to do. Now, granted, this is here in Colorado where the snow melts off pretty quick. It wasn't up in Boston or New Hampshire or Connecticut where they're getting all that snow. Yeah, right now. But these guys, they served in the way that they felt that the Lord was prompting them to do. In the Old Testament, the prophet Micah, at the end of the Old Testament, he knew the difference between what the people were actually doing and what God was calling them to do. And as it is with most of the prophets in the Old Testament, when you read them, they weren't exactly known for their tact. And they pretty much said the things the way that the Lord was revealing it to them. They didn't pull any punches. So open your Bibles and look at Matthew chapter 6, starting at verse 6. Micah 6. I said Matthew, didn't I? Micah 6, starting at verse 6. And it says, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams and 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Shall I only give back to the Lord what I think he wants? Or should I give him what he's telling me to do?" Look at verse 8. "He has told you, O man, he has told you, O woman, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly, to be obedient before your Lord?" I love this verse. And I love the fact that the Lord doesn't keep us guessing as to what he's asking for us to do. It's pretty black and white right there in front of you. And it says we are to do justice, we're to love kindness, we're to walk humbly before our God. These are things that he has told us are good. And all around us, here in Denver, here in Commerce City, there are good things that are going on all around us. And there's some amazing things that the Lord is doing right here in our community. And so this morning I've asked Darius Wise, who is the Executive Director of Upstream Impact, to come and share with us just for a couple minutes about some of the things that the Lord is doing right here in Commerce City and in Denver, things that we didn't even know necessarily were going on. But as we start the dialogue, as we start to talk with one another, we see, Lord, you're asking me to do that, or maybe that intrigues me, or maybe that sparks something in my life that the Lord is calling for me to do. So Darius, you can come up and you can share with us just a little bit about what the Lord is doing. Thanks for that.
Praise God for the externally focused church, right? When Jay was talking, I felt guilty because I'm the Starbucks guy. Even my kids are really enjoying the Starbucks journey nowadays. But very quickly, about Upstream Impact, we're an anti-poverty campaign. And about a year ago, it's amazing what God does with individuals whose hearts are broken for their community. About a year ago, we started along this journey. We recognized that in near Northeast Denver, 27.5% of the families who live in that community live in poverty. And what does that mean? They live without enough resources to meet daily needs. And so that's 4,400 families in that geographic area who live below the federal poverty guideline. And we started to ask ourselves questions. We decided to stop asking questions. What if we got together and did this? What if we could do this? Or what if we could see their lives change? And we just rolled up our sleeves and we said, we're going to do something about this. So our process is very simple within Upstream Impact. Families apply to be a part of the program. These are families who live below the federal poverty guideline, obviously. Over 100 families apply. with a month's notice. And so that was almost unheard of in that environment. A new program without much credibility. Needless to say, we adopted a 10-year-old process. And it's a nationally recognized Circles campaign. It's an anti-poverty campaign. It's called Circles. And the whole idea behind Circles is you match lower income families with middle to upper class allies. And many of you would say, well, why middle to upper class allies? And here's what we say. There's no significant learning that happens without significant relationship. And so there are people needed like you and I who God has richly blessed to have some experience that these families don't necessarily have. And we want that social capital, those allies, to become friends first and mentors second. Why do we say friends first? Because typically, the mindset that we approach giving or charity with is doing for those in need rather than doing with is the norm, right? So we typically do for. Well, I'm going to go feed the homeless, or I'm going to buy something for someone, or I'm going to pay someone's rent for them without necessarily doing with. At Upstream Impact, what we say is we don't do for, we do with. We do with. We want to become partners. In James 2 and 5, here's why. James 2 and 5. It says, listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and inherit the kingdom he promised for those who love him? At Upstream Impact, we say it's a level playing field, guys. It's what we recognize is that if I went around this room, every single one of us, in one way or another, have some sort of poverty. Whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, whether it's spiritually, whether it's relationally, there is some sort of poverty that we function with. So that's why relationships are mutual, because we realize that I'm just as messed up as you are. And our whole goal, our whole thrust for Upstream Impact is to get cleaned up together so the relationships are reciprocal. Just a quick story. There's a friend of ours who we're helping. Now, we're working with 27 families currently right now, 41 children. So that's close to about 80 people that we get the privilege of walking with. We're working with a young lady, and I'll change her name to protect the innocent. But I'll call her Angie. And Angie's a 38-year-old crack addict. 38 years on crack. She's been clean for 8 years. And here's what she says. She's got every bit of motivation to see her life change. But she just doesn't have the tools to do it. And so what Upstream Impact is doing is coming alongside of her, removing every barrier that we possibly can to see her situation turn around. She's on her way to getting a job, guys. She's on her way to her children being fully functional in society today because we decided to roll up our sleeves and stop asking what if and start doing something about it. Here's what Angie wrote to us. She said, and this was after a couple of days of her missing our weekly meetings, because every week we get together and we have a communal meal, and after that communal meal we have some instruction time. And just very quickly, the program is they go 20 weeks through a curriculum called Getting Ahead, and it identifies where they are in the poverty cycle, and more importantly, helps them to develop a strategy behind where they need to go. And she missed a couple of those weeks, and me and my coworker, our other executive director, we just said, the heck with it, we're going over to her house unannounced. So we went over there and we knocked on the door. I didn't know what was going to happen. But we knocked on the door and she opened it, and her eyes just welled up with tears. She said, I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think you'd come find me. And here's what she said to us after we had a meeting and we kind of had that come to Jesus talk. She said, Darius, you touched me in a place in my heart today that I truly thought had died. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for not giving up on me. All people need at times is just a nudge. And here's why we recruit allies. We recruit allies. We don't ask for your money. And you guys are so generous at taking up an unexpected offering for us. So thank you, Faith Venture. But we don't ask for allies. We don't ask for your money. We ask for your time. One of those resources that we hold so near and dear to our hearts. But a lot of times we want to throw money at a problem. We don't ask for any money. God, praise God, we are absolutely funded. It's almost unheard of. When Jay presented the check, I went, thanks, man, but we don't need this, but we'll take it. Great. But we ask for allies' time, because it's your time that makes the change in someone's life. It's you picking up the phone and say, hey, how are you doing on those goals? Hey, why didn't you follow up? Hey, I'm going to knock on your door and show up on your front door, and maybe that'll do it. Maybe that'll just show you that, hey, we care. Another one of our program participants, she's a single mother, 22 years old, and been on public assistance all her life. That's all she knows. So it's generational poverty. And at one point, she was at that point where she was feeling down, and here's something she wrote. She said, thank you, dearest. I always feel so much better when I leave Upstream Impact. You have no idea how long I've waited for an opportunity like this. Upstream Impact is my angels in disguise. Here's a plus. We get to touch people that wouldn't step foot in this church. When you become an externally focused church, you'll get the privilege of touching people that Jesus, as Pastor Jay so eloquently put, that Jesus is so cares. His heart beats for those people. His heart breaks for that community who won't step foot up in here on a Sunday until they see that Jesus cares, or what you and I do on a day-to-day basis. And so becoming an externally focused church and partnering with organizations, whether it be Upstream Impact or other great community nonprofit organizations that are doing great things for the community, it's not just about meeting that quota of, hey, I served, or hey, I volunteered. It's about literally becoming the hands and feet of Jesus in our community so that others may love and serve the Jesus that we love and serve. Guys, thank you today. Here's our hope. Our hope is that you'll continue to partner with us, not just financially, but even through possibly becoming an ally. Maybe some of you guys pricking your heart saying, hey, Darius, that's me. I want to sow my time into what you guys are doing. If you say, hey, I want to sow a check, another check, we'll take it. But we really want your time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Darius. This week, I want to challenge you to do something. And what I want to challenge you to do this week is I want you to pray. I want you to pray in a way that you have never prayed before. And I want you to pray for this. That the Holy Spirit will show you ways that you can serve others. I want Him to shine in your life, a person, a place, an event, a situation. You don't forget shine. I want Him to electrify. I want Him to illuminate. I want you to bask in the glory of God and the things that only you can do in that given situation. And I want you to pray, and I want you to ask, Lord, how can I serve others? What are you prompting me to do in my unique situation? What are you asking me to do? And I want you to pray that. But here's the thing. When you pray, God hears. When you pray, God answers. And some of you, you're going to come back to church next week. And you're going to run up to me and you're going to say, Pastor Jay, you're not going to believe what happened to me this week. There was this person and they came up to me and they just said, I need you to help me. And I was able to help them. And I'm going to smile. Because I've already been praying for you this week. I've already been praying for this message this week. I've already been praying for each of you this week. That you would be praying for the ways that God can uniquely use you to be an externally focused church and to be a healthy member in this kingdom. And so that's what I want to do right now. I want to pray. And I want to ask God to show us ways in our community, in our families, in our friends, in our jobs, in our schools, ways that we can serve Him. And to open up our arms. And to say to the community, here's Faith Venture Church. We're here to serve you. We're here to love you. We're here to care about you. And we want to be in a relationship with you. and here's why. And share. Go ahead and bow your heads. Mike,